Is the Supreme Court's verdict on the Sabarimala temple in line with Vedanta? Or is this judgment an attack on Hindu temples and their customs by a secular constitution? These are the questions that are going through the minds of many people in our country, and so in this two-part video series I shall list out the reasons why the Supreme Court's verdict is actually perfectly in line with the teachings of Vedanta, and it is certainly not an attack on Hinduism, its temples and its customs. As a matter of fact, the Supreme Court's judgment is a much needed social reform that should have been implemented long ago. The Sabarimala Temple Authorities on their own should have brought forth this change. But since that did not happen, therefore the Supreme Court's judgment which has pushed through this reform is a welcome one indeed. Now before we dive into the reasons why the Supreme Court's judgment is in line with Vedanta, let us familiarize ourselves with the background to the whole issue. And the best resource for gathering this information is the verdict pronounced by the judges of the Supreme Court themselves. This judgment from the Supreme Court was not delivered in a 4 or 5 line statement, but each sitting judge has released nearly a 100-page long document which contains all the details of the case. These details include the information provided by the temple authorities as well as details provided by other people before the court. So if we read the statements of these judges, which are written in a very easy to understand manner just like a book, we can arrive at all the correct facts of the case. Otherwise, if we go about relying on newspapers, opinion columns and blogs, we will find that the information presented there is either incomplete or outright wrong, as people concoct all sorts of illogical stories and justifications simply to prove their point. So the best thing to do is always to go to the source. Now, according to the information submitted by the temple authorities before the Supreme Court, Sabarimala is a temple in India which prohibits menstruating women between the age groups of 10 and 50 years from entering the temple. Girls below 10 and women above 50 are allowed, but this in-between age group is prohibited. Now, this ban on women of menstruating age historically has not always been consistently imposed by the Sabarimala temple management. According to the information presented before the Supreme Court, prior to the year 1950, women of menstruating age were allowed by the temple authorities to visit Sabarimala in order to conduct the rice feeding ceremonies for their children before the idol of Lord Ayyappa. Thus, prior to 1950, there was no explicit rule prohibiting women between 10 and 50 years from entering the Sabarimala temple. But despite there being no explicit ban back then, not many women visited the temple. However, after 1950, the ban was strictly imposed by the temple authorities. So the exclusion of women between the age groups of 10 and 50 has actually not been consistently imposed by the temple authorities. Rather, the ban has had a checkered history. This Sabarimala temple, which is located in Kerala, is dedicated to Lord Ayyappa, who is considered to be a child of both Lord Shiva and Vishnu. The story goes that Lord Vishnu took the form of Mohini and brought forth a child with Shiva. This child was Lord Ayyappa. Now we must understand that this of course is just a story. It cannot be taken literally to mean that Lord Ayyappa is the child of two male gods. Rather, the story is a symbolic expression of the fact that Lord Ayyappa is the embodiment of the perfect compassion of Lord Vishnu and the perfect tapasya or penance of Lord Shiva. Since Lord Ayyappa is an embodiment of both these divine qualities, therefore he is said to be a child of Shiva and Vishnu. Another thing to note is that there are thousands of temples dedicated to Lord Ayyappa all across India, and women freely worship in all these temples. But it is only at Sabarimala that women in the menstruating age group of 10 to 50 years are prohibited from entering. Finally, the last point to note is that Sabarimala is a shrine that is frequented not just by Hindus but by Muslim and Christian devotees as well. So this is the background to the case. Now there are three key reasons which have been offered by the temple authorities before the Supreme Court as justifications for imposing such a ban. Let us go through them one by one and analyze their validity from a Vedantic perspective. We will cover the first two justifications in this video and the third justification in the next. So the first and foremost reason that has been cited by the head priest or Tantri of Sabarimala is that the particular form of Lord Ayyappa that is worshipped at Sabarimala is that of an eternal celibate, what is called a Naishtika Brahmachari. At other Ayyappa temples, other aspects of Lord Ayyappa are worshipped, and therefore there is no need to debar women from those temples. But at Sabarimala, since the celibate form is worshipped, therefore the presence of women of menstruating age would distract Lord Ayyappa, whose consciousness is present in the idol, from his vow. This is the chief reason that has been cited before the Supreme Court by the Sabarimala Temple Authorities. Now, not only has this reason been proven wrong from the constitutional viewpoint as being discriminatory towards women, but even when analyzed from a Vedantic perspective, this reason is once again underscored to be deeply prejudiced and incorrect. Because Lord Ayyappa, who is the embodiment of absolute Brahmacharya, of perfect, unchangeable and unshakable celibacy, such a divine being cannot possibly get affected by the mere presence of women in his temple. For if he did get affected, then his celibacy would be of an utterly weak, degenerate and imperfect kind. It would be like the abstinence of an alcoholic who fools himself by saying, "I never drink except when a bottle of alcohol is placed before me." So it is not at all conceivable that Lord Ayyappa, whom women worship as the Divine Father, would begin to feel lustful at the mere sight of his own daughters. What then would be the difference between him and Ravana, the demon who lusted after Sita? In fact, if he was such a weak and lustful god, then it would be better to stop praying to him, for what can he grant us who himself has not attained to any lasting self-control? Furthermore, if Lord Hanuman, who is also worshipped as the ideal of celibacy, does not lose his brahmacharya when women visit his temples all across India, then why must Lord Ayyappa? The second fallacy in this reasoning is that it considers Lord Ayyappa's consciousness to be confined only to the idol in the temple. It believes that Lord Ayyappa is not an omnipresent god but an ordinary person like us whose jurisdiction is confined to within the Sabarimala temple's premises. The Lord, according to this reasoning, can see only those women who enter his temple, but not those who are residing and going about their daily lives outside its gates. Therefore, Lord Ayyappa's vow of celibacy gets shaken only when young women of childbearing physiology enter the temple, but not if they walk outside its premises. This fallacious reasoning completely forgets that Lord Ayyappa is not a person or a human being, but he is an omnipresent divinity who is present everywhere and in all places simultaneously. It is only because of this omnipresent power of his consciousness that Lord Ayyappa can actively respond to multitudes of men and women, all praying and calling for his help simultaneously while they go about living their lives in various towns and cities all across the world. Furthermore, since Lord Ayyappa is the omnipresent divine whose consciousness is located everywhere, therefore if a woman of menstruating age living say in Delhi prays to Lord Ayyappa from her home, she is praying to the same celibate divine being whose consciousness is also present in the idol at the Sabarimala temple. So if Lord Ayyappa does not become lustful when his consciousness is drawn towards the sincere prayers of the woman in Delhi, why then should his celibacy be affected when the same woman visits Sabarimala and prays before his idol? It cannot be so. So Lord Ayyappa, we must realize, is not like this. He is far above such ignorant and foolish human conceptions. Like Lord Shiva and Vishnu, Lord Ayyappa is the ever pure, the ever perfect, utterly unaffected by worldly wants and desires. Like Lord Hanuman, he is the ideal of perfect brahmacharya, of perfect control over the senses, including the one related to sexual desires. By worshipping him, men and women together place before their minds the ideal of perfect self-control, of perfect mastery over lust and other passions, which leads to the attainment of samadhi or union of the individual soul with God. So we can see that there exists a tremendous gap between what Lord Ayyappa actually is and what ordinary people think he is. This gap between reality and perception arises because people unfortunately tend to superimpose their own limited ideas and beliefs upon God. Since people themselves are of a weak mental disposition and are also ignorant about the real nature of God, having not realized him in samadhi, therefore they feel that God too must be troubled by the same lustful emotions as they are. People in their ignorance have thus reduced a perfect God to an imperfect being and have used this misguided ideology to implement social sanctions that have hurt not only the dignity and self-respect of Hindu women, but which have also done an immense disservice to Hinduism, a religion which has accorded the highest pedestal to women by worshipping them as embodiments of the divine. As Swami Vivekananda has said, in all religions everything degenerates upon being practiced by the ignorant. And his statement is certainly true in the case of the Sabarimala ban. Weak and profane minds have distorted the high spiritual truths for servicing their own deformed and superstitious beliefs. Moving on to the second reason cited by temple authorities, this one is that the presence of women of menstruating age will not only distract Lord Ayyappa, but it will also distract the male pilgrims to Sabarimala. These male pilgrims, who typically undertake a 41-day vow of celibacy and travel to the shrine, would face unnecessary distractions on the way to the shrine. This argument too is a weak one. Firstly, male pilgrims are not travelling to Sabarimala on a vow of not looking at any woman. They are not conducting their journey exclusively under the cover of darkness between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. in the morning, when they will come across almost no women on the streets. Rather, these male pilgrims are travelling to Sabarimala by foot, by train, by bus, etc., a journey along which they meet plenty of women of all ages. Furthermore, the real test of self-control is by remaining in the midst of all temptations and not in running away from them. In fact, a sincere pilgrim will practice looking upon all women as the embodiments of the Divine Mother and not as objects of sexual excitation. This is the true Sattvic Bhav, or the pure emotion, to cultivate. Then only can the practice of Brahmacharya or celibacy for 41 days yield any real fruit of spiritual upliftment. As Sri Aurobindo has explained, it is not the mentally weak and the coward who can climb up to God, but the strong and the brave alone. Meaning only those who have the strength to master themselves and control their base instincts can attain to God. For this reason, Sri Aurobindo has said that every individual Jivatman, that is every individual soul, must become the perfect Kshatriya, the perfect warrior who tackles his or her own inner weaknesses before he or she can become the Brahmin, that is the one who has attained to a union with Brahman or God. And this practice of attaining to unshakable self-control is done not by removing oneself from the temptations of life, but by staying in their midst and consistently working to root out the desires that arise for these temptations in our mind. Otherwise, as Mother Meera has cautioned, if we run away from life and its temptations and submerge ourselves in a cave-like atmosphere, then we can never really know whether we have made any spiritual progress or not. We may live under the illusion of self-control, but we would not have attained to anything lasting or genuine. It is only the contact with the temptations of life that makes us aware of not only the progress we have made, but also of the progress that remains to be made. Secondly, it is not just men but women too who must, according to Vedanta, practice Brahmacharya or celibacy and attain to God realization. And allowing women of all ages to undertake the vow of Brahmacharya, of absolute celibacy in thoughts, words and deeds, and travel to Sabarimala to worship the very epitome of Brahmacharya in the form of Lord Ayyappa, is the best and the most Vedantic way to encourage them forward on the spiritual path. Now the third and last argument cited by temple authorities is that there is an age-old custom in Hinduism wherein menstruating women do not perform pujas or enter temples because in the days of their periods they are considered to be impure. Now we will scrutinize the Vedantic validity of this custom in the next video. Until then, take care and goodbye.